Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be wrapping these two beautiful teardrop shaped stones into a single pendant. The stone on the left is Belemorite moonstone and the stone on the right is rainbow labradorite. I like to keep things super simple and only use these two tools in the creation of my jewellery pieces. The piece of equipment on the left is a wire snip. I really recommend getting sharp, strong wire snips. It will make everything a lot easier. And the pliers on the right are bent nose pliers. Really strong, high quality bent nose pliers make a world of difference and really recommend investing in some. To begin, we start with a piece of 1mm wire or 18 gauge wire, and our weaving wire today will be 0.4mm or 26 gauge weaving wire, and we're simply going to begin by anchoring the weaving wire onto the base wire by simply coiling it around a few times, maybe 5 or 6 times, to really make sure that it's tightly secured to the base wire. And once we're happy with that, we can add in the second base wire. Unfortunately, I didn't measure these pieces, so you may just have to eyeball it. I generally, for measuring the wire for my pendants, will make a length of wire that's 3 times the size of the stone or stones. And so I've wrapped the weaving wire around those two pieces of wire, and now that I've added in a third base wire, I will weave up between the first and second piece and over the second and third piece, so the weaving wire is only wrapping around 2 pieces of wire every time. And now I've added in a 4th piece of base wire, and I've done the same thing wherein the weaving wire has come up between the second and third piece and wrapped around the third and 4th piece, and so on. So we continue this pattern back down the strands of base wire and continue wrapping them 2 at a time to continue this pattern. Once we arrive back down at that original base wire, we'll just coil the weaving wire around a few times. I generally like to do coils that are the same number as the amount of base wires I have, but there's really no rule to this. When it comes to weaving patterns, it's totally up to you to experiment and create whatever you think looks nice. And this is what you should end up with. This is one segment of this weave, and we'll simply continue to replicate this pattern over and over again. So again, I'm weaving over the first and second base wire, then bringing the weaving wire up behind the first and second piece, over the second and third piece, back up through the second and third piece, and then over the third and 4th piece. I really recommend having a nice tight grip whilst you're doing this, and making sure to push the wire along with your nail, or if you prefer using a tool and that's easier for you, as long as the wires are nice and tight, then it's just gonna make everything a lot easier and means that the final outcome of the piece will look a lot neater and tidier. So I've continued this pattern along for the same length as that bottom stone that I'm using for this piece. I did realise after I had woven this section that I totally forgot to bend the base wires into a point, which I would usually do before I begin weaving. So this is totally my fault, and what I've done here is I've pushed the weaving segment up the base wires a little bit so that I can bend the base wires in the center here. This isn't ideal. I would have liked to have made these points in the middle of the wire before I started weaving, so please keep that in mind, but this is a good example of how you can sometimes go back and do things that you've forgotten to do in the right order. So I'm just using my bent nose pliers to create a nice sharp angle here with the base wires. This would have been a lot easier to do before I'd woven them together, and if I'd just bent them one by one, I think it would have been neater, but I am pretty happy with how this has turned out. And then I simply push that section of woven wire back down to the point, to the bends in the wire there. And I just check with the stone to make sure that I've woven enough to create a nice frame for the stone. And I'm done with this side, so now I'm just going to snip the wire off and begin weaving on the other side. And to do that, it's very much the same as the first half of the weave on the other side, where you create an anchor and literally just replicate exactly what you've done on the first side and make sure that it's the same height. And now I am bending that weave around. I want to make it as close to the shape of the stone that I'm wrapping as possible. So this can take some trial and error. Just, use your fingers, go slow with the bending of the wire, and the softer and smaller the bends are each time you bend it, the less likely this is to go wrong, and the wire will be more forgiving if you go about manipulating and bending the wire very slowly and carefully. Once that section of woven wire has been shaped to the stone, make sure the ends are all straight and parallel to each other. And now we're going to continue this weave, but we're actually going to join all of the pieces of wire together. So very similarly to the weaving that we've done so far, I'm simply weaving 2 pieces of wire at a time, and I'm going to continue across the gap here between these bits of wire and join all of the pieces together. So you see here, gently bringing the 2 halves of wire ends together and joining them with this weave. Remembering to go 2 at a time and bringing that up between those 2 that you've just woven, over the next 2, and so on and so forth. This is what it should look like once you've done 1 row of this pattern, making sure to keep it nice and tight and push the weave down to the base of the wire. And I've done maybe 3 rows of this weave now, and we're going to split these wires apart again so that we can begin weaving the frame for the next stone, which will be at the top of this pendant. If you can keep the weaving wire going for as long as possible without needing to snip it, it really does make things more seamless, and it means there are less rough pointy bits to neaten out later. So I'm going to continue the same weave pattern as we've just done for the frame for the bottom stone. Check the length of your weave against the length of the stone. I tend to overweave slightly so that I definitely have enough, as it's pretty easy to snip away any excess segments of weave later on, and it's better to have too much than not enough. And then I begin weaving on the other side, again anchoring the weaving wire onto the base wire using some coils, and then beginning that same weave pattern again. I did find that I weaved too much, so I simply snipped away some excess weave from the frame here. Try and do it at a point that is at the base near the coiled part, and if you have also overwoven your frame, make sure to keep it symmetrical and count the weaves on either side to make sure that there's the same amount of weave pattern on both sides of the frame. Now that we've finished the frame, I have now bent the ends of these wires outwards to begin weaving the bail, and once again we're just going to anchor the weaving wire onto one of those innermost base wires and then weave those two together just like this. This will make it a lot easier to continue along weaving the bail. The weaving pattern we're going to do here is the same one I use for most of my pieces. You can use a different weaving pattern for the bail, it's totally up to you. It's fun to experiment with different weaves and different patterns. I like this one the most for pieces where there are a lot of base wires in the bail, as this particular pattern is really strong and neat and looks really nice when the piece is finished. So it's just covering two pieces at a time, weaving over two base pieces at a time. Should be quite self-explanatory. We are going to add another level to the frame, so this part of the bail is going to finish after just doing about 4 or 5 passes, and then we're going to continue the bail after we have added the next layer of the frame. For the outer layer of the frame for this pendant, I've got 2 pieces of 1.5mm base wire. This will create a really nice strong contrast to the thinner wires that I use for the frame that we just created. So I'm bending this right in the center, and we're gonna do the same as I should have done for the very beginning of the rest of the frame before I started weaving it. And we're using the bent nose pliers to create a nice sharp angle in the middle of this piece of wire. And we're going to do the same for the second piece of wire, again making sure that this sharp bend is as central as possible, using our fingers to press the wire against the bent nose pliers, creating a nice sharp angle. I actually decided I wanted one of these pieces to point out at the bottom of the pendant, as I really like the elegant sleek shape this creates. So we're using the pliers to pinch the bend together to create a nice sharp shape, and then bending outwards so that the angle is the same as the angle on the other piece of wire, so that we can proceed to weave them together. Once those two pieces are fitting together really nicely, we can start weaving them together. So after doing that initial coil on the inside base wire, we're going to weave twice around both wires, and then do about 4 or 5 coils around that inside wire, before then weaving twice around both wires again. And so we'll just continue this very simple weaving pattern up most of the length of the wire. So 5 coils around the inside wire, and then 2 coils around both of them. And then once we have completed a length of wire that is about the same length as the inside frame that we've already created, then we're going to stop. So now we've woven this length of wire just longer than that inside frame. I do recommend weaving a little bit longer than you need to, just in case, and then we're going to repeat the same thing on the other side. We can now start bending that outside frame to essentially match the flow of the inside frame. We want to leave a nice small gap between the two frames for weaving wires between them later on, but for now let's focus on making that outside frame nice and symmetrical and fitting to the shape of the inside frame. I think this step is quite self-explanatory. If you are struggling with the symmetry, I'd recommend counting the weaves to help measure where along the base wire you want to create your bend. Now that that outside frame nicely fits the inside frame, we're going to start weaving the bail. So we want to have all of the ends of the wires nice and flush and parallel to each other before we start weaving. So we'll begin the bail by anchoring on the weaving wire with a coil on that second wire from the outside. I think this looks nice because it sort of continues on the weave that we've done on that outside frame. And then I'm going to coil the weaving wire around those two thicker outside pieces twice, because this matches the weave that we have done along that outside frame, and also because these two outside wires are thicker, it will be sturdier and stronger to wrap twice around them. And then, just as we did for the beginning of the bail earlier on for the inside frame, we're simply going to wrap 2 wires at a time. If you need a refresher on this, maybe go back to the section that we covered earlier, but this is just going to be doing more of the same. And when we get to those two thicker outside pieces for the outside part of the frame, we're just going to coil twice around those pieces. Well done if you have completed a good couple inches of this weave. I know that weaving together so many pieces of wire can feel a little tedious, but hopefully you have also been able to drop into a flow state with it. We're going to finish off the bail by just coiling again around that same outside piece. You can coil around any piece, but I just like to have a sense of symmetry, and we're going to snip off the ends of the weaving wire before using any tool you like really to bend the bail. I just like using my pliers because I like having minimal tools with me. You can get a bail tool that is specifically for this purpose, but I find that using my pliers, or even sometimes I use a pen to bend the bail around, I find that that is sufficient. And then we're just going to pinch the bail down nice and tight against the frame. Next, I like to just separate out all of these wire ends because it can get a little bit confusing, and I do often end up pairing up the wrong ones, so try and organize them and split them in half, however is easiest for you. We'll be beginning by focusing on the ones in the middle, so you should have 5 wires on either side and then 2 in the middle. I like to secure these first because it just makes the rest of it easier in my mind, and organizing the rest of the wires I find it a lot easier, and it's nice to just secure that central back column. So these pieces have come all the way down the central back pathway and then over and around the front, as close to the bottom central point as we can possibly get them. These will help to keep the gemstones in place really nicely and just create a lot of security for the back of this whole piece. For the next set of wires, it will be much the same. We want to just focus at the beginning of this part of the process on simply creating a lot of security for the gemstones. So making sure that there's a nice net of wires behind where the gemstones will be placed will be the priority here. So these wires will be secured just like the central ones that we just did. At this point it looks like I can go ahead and slide in that bottom gemstone. It looks pretty secure at the back there. We want to get the gemstone in at a point where the wires are still fairly loose, because it'll get to a point later where they're too tight to pull the gemstones in. And at this stage in the process as well, it'll be easier to tell where the wires need to be pulled a bit tighter in order to make the gemstone more secure. This part of the process is maybe my favourite, because securing the ends of the wires is where the piece gains its sort of personality and its own uniqueness, because the frames can look quite similar, but the securing of the ends of the wires is always different and always unique, and you can get really creative with it. So feel free to secure these wires kind of anywhere you want to, keeping in mind of course that where you secure them will impact the sturdiness of the piece, and you want to make it aesthetic as well as practical in terms of keeping the gemstone secured. I find it useful to thread these wire ends into the frame where the stone is, so that it's touching the stone, like I'm doing right here. This particular positioning of the wire in this kind of design, I find really helps to keep the gemstone really snug and tight. So you'll see me doing this quite often. If you overdo this, it can push the gemstone up or kind of dislodge it, so gently play around with how this fits your design, and if positioning the wire ends in this way is suitable for the shape of the stone, etc. I was finding this piece particularly challenging in terms of keeping the gemstones inside, but as long as you can continue to put them inside the frame and see how they're fitting, and sometimes when you're creating the piece and it's in its final stages like this, they just don't want to stay in place until you've got everything really nice and snug, so don't worry too much about that if your stones are also falling out. I decided at this point that I needed to actually secure some of these back wires a little bit more tightly to the front of the frame, so I have threaded through a piece of weaving wire in order to pull a couple of these central back wires nice and tightly to the frame, and just sort of tightly threaded this weaving wire through a few times to create tighter backing for this piece. And then the final steps is just carefully snipping off the excess wire as close as possible as you can to where you want it to end, and tucking in those sharp edges into the frame in a way that means that they're secure and they're not poking out, and you can of course use a metal filer to file down any sharp edges later. And this is the finished piece. Thank you guys so much for tuning in and following along, and if you've made it this far into this video, congratulations. I would absolutely love to see what you guys have created. If you followed this tutorial or any of my other tutorials, or if you've made anything inspired by my work, I would absolutely love to see what you've created. If you'd like to see how this piece turned out after I finished oxidizing it, you can see that on my Instagram, as well as anything that I'm currently up to. You can follow along on my Instagram.